Hey everyone, welcome to another Psychological Problems podcast with me, Sakura Yasin, and Flavia.
Me.
And today we have a special guest who may be well known to you. His name is Bob Meatbag.
That's me.
The reason Bob is here, why are you here, Bob?
Oh, I am living with you guys now.
He is our tenant. We keep him down below.
Yes.
We adopted him.
So, we live in a small town called Princeton now. What do you think about Princeton, Bob? How does it tickle your fancy?
Not too bad. It's cold, so I like it.
That's good. Anyway, so guess what we were going to talk, or what I wanted to talk a bit about, is art as a language. Because this is an idea I've been talking to students about a lot recently. And it's that art is very much like a language. There you go.
That's it.
That's the whole thing. But the way I think of it is kind of... well, I've already said the way I think of it is kind of, so this is all redundant. But you know when you're learning a new language, well, if you do know about learning a new language, but sometimes you learn like one thing, one phrase, and then you can say that phrase pretty fluently, but it doesn't mean you know the language well. So, for instance, when I was learning Chinese, I learned how to say 我不明白你说什么, and it's okay, but it's like I don't really know Chinese.
You mean like you learned a specific thing?
Yeah.
And in that one instance, you can use it, but in any other system, it's like you can't speak anything else beyond that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What does it mean? What you just said?
It means est-ce que je peux aller aux toilettes?
Oh.
No, it doesn't. It means I don't understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Oh.
Anyway, so I was thinking about how this relates to art, and it relates to me in that I learned pretty early on how to draw like a side view face by, you know, the forehead, the line, you start at the forehead, you go down, you get the nose, then you get the lips, and then the chin. And I kind of memorized that. And it's like, okay, as long as I draw this, I can do an okay face. And some people have like the anime face where they can draw one face and it's good. They just draw that one face. They're okay. And then sometimes it's a few phrases, I guess. Like you can draw this body in this position, okay. Or you can draw a cat in this pose, all right. But you can't draw cats in other poses. Just that one pose, because that's your pose. That's your phrase that you can say with fluency.
But that's a lot like a child learns. Like the early stages of learning language and concepts for a child. They're not concepts yet. They're just instances of, oh, mama, papa, keep getting repeated. Oh, and then you associate them with the mother and father. Like, oh,
yeah.
It's not consistent yet. It's not crystallized.
Yeah, so that's how I think I started drawing. Is I learned one phrase or a few phrases, but then what happens is the next period, which is trying to learn the language and really stumbling and having a hard time, and you want to say something, but you just can't find the right words, or you try to piece together something from what limited vocabulary you have, and you may sound bad. I mean, this is if you're learning a second language. If it's a first language, it tends to be quite natural. And I think there are people who learn art as if it was their first language. But yeah, there's a stumbling period, and then eventually, hopefully, you get to the point where you're fluent and you can speak well and without too much of an accent or whatever it is. And that's where I'm finally getting to with art. And in doing so, art becomes less about kind of like the language, you're not thinking about the words to say as much as you're thinking about the meaning of the words. So, the meaning, you just say what you want to say instead of thinking about what do I want to say and how do I say it. You just say it. And maybe your thoughts start to be in that language.
You mean like you're going beyond literal meanings and creating metaphors and sentences, right?
Yeah, and you're fluent to the point that you don't have to translate the language in your head. So what I discovered is that it's a lot nicer once you are fluent, but it takes a lot in the beginning, a lot of mileage, and I don't know why it took me so long to finally grasp the language, but...
well, we did go through a period where we just kept on jumping ships, right? So we went from one topic to another that never really sunk into something.
Yeah, but you got a hold of the language far sooner than I did. It wasn't much after school that I think you were pretty fluent.
I suppose so.
Doesn't it have something to do with when you begin to learn that respective language and how much... Because when you learn a language as an adult, most adults don't, like the vast majority of adults, never get rid of their accent no matter how long they've been, even if they're immersed in the culture of that language. They never get rid of their accent because there's a lot of extra layering that goes on. And when you learn a language as a child, even if it's a second language, and you're immersed, it's much easier, and all the failures you happen to experience along the way, they're expected. Because people expect you to be clumsy as a child. People expect you to goo goo gaga and misspell words and say, like, I don't know, silly things. I don't know what a kid would say. And with Bob, you were drawing a lot since you were small Bob.
Yeah, small Bob. I've been drawing since I was super young.
And you were drawing all the time, right?
Yeah, I was drawing all the time. I got into trouble because I drew on the walls. So there's that. But I suppose maybe that has something to do with it. It's like
it was your first language, pretty much.
Yeah. It's like
primary language, anyway.
Yeah, and I suppose for me, it's just like maybe it's not even drawing anything coherent. Because like there are times where I would visualize things and attempt to draw it, but it wouldn't come out as anything. But there's also times where I just drew scribbles, and then it's just like, oh, okay, so I developed muscle memory when I was that young when it comes to drawing, like which might explain my speed, for example. Yeah,
and it's something that's very good to have, and because I didn't have it, I had to reverse engineer how I figured people who did have it proceeded, and it seemed to me that when I talked to artists who have it as a first language, they were always drawing early on, but more than that, they were drawing for fun, and it wasn't this heavy thing. So what it means to draw for fun is that you're likely gonna enjoy doing it, and you're gonna do it a lot. Just gaining mileage with drawing, not necessarily like drawing well, or drawing, I don't know, a thing and understanding a thing, but more just the act of drawing. You just do that a lot. So I guess for you, Bob, you drew a lot, and then you had enough mileage to the point that when it was time to learn about art, you already had sufficient resources to do that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it just felt like there were times when I'm drawing, what didn't necessarily feel as though my decisions were like super weighty. And any blocks I came across was only when I hit my limitations. But even then, just expressing a line can be something that's very easy. It's like it doesn't have to have intent behind it. It's like, I'm going to express this line, and there's no conscientiousness about it, I suppose. And I'm not sure if that's the right word. But because there are times when I look back on when I learned to draw, it's like, oh, I noticed that I can carry a more confident line than most people. And then it's just like, okay, so it's just, for me, expressing a line isn't something that's forced. It's very natural to me.
Yeah. And like, let's say you wanted to write a book.
Yeah.
And you understand the language fluently, then you really think about, what am I going to write? But if you're writing and you don't really know the language well, you're almost like a translator. You have to think of the thing you want to say, and then perhaps look up, how am I supposed to say that in this language, and then translate it. And I think that's something that I had, like I got to that point, where if I had reference in art, I could draw the thing pretty well, as long as I had reference. But if I didn't have reference, I was pretty much screwed. When it came to drawing from imagination, again, I could only draw those few phrases that I had memorized, and then everything else was really difficult. Unless, again, I had reference. And I see a lot of artists who are like this, and who, they're okay so long as they have reference, but when they don't, it really does fall apart in terms of their creativity and their skill and their appeal. So what I decided a while back, pretty much when I started Pointy Chins, but it really picked up in the last few months, is to draw as if I was a child. And how does a child draw? Well, they draw for fun. They don't draw what they're supposed to draw. Like, oh, I should do perspective or values or anatomy studies because that's what an artist should do. It's more just you draw what you have fun doing. And it was really hard for me. Because at first all I wanted to do is draw faces. And I would draw a face and I would think, yeah, but now I should draw a body, or I should draw more to this. I should do something more interesting. And then I draw another face and it's like, yeah, this is kind of dumb. I'm just drawing faces. This isn't enough. This isn't a finished illustration. But I told myself, shut up. Get that voice out of the way. And then by drawing faces over and over and allowing myself to just draw what I wanted to draw, eventually I kind of wanted to draw bodies instead of I should do it. It just was like, oh yeah, but this would help if there was this. So
just learning to be more natural, basically.
Yeah, learning to have fun and not fight yourself.
No, learning to fight the adult voice. You should be doing this, you should be doing that. This is what an artist is supposed to do. This is sounds very parental.
And I've pretty much had that the whole way, or at least for the last 10 years. That's been a really strong voice. This, well, sure, I would draw this, but I should draw something else. Like, I should color this picture, and I should have good values, and I should make it look rendered, and, make a portfolio piece, or do this, or do that. There's always a end thing that I should achieve. Recently, what I'm struggling with is this. So I got some core memberships in DeviantArt, like as gifts. And what they are is basically, it lets you do some special things in DeviantArt and post. And it's really nice. I'm really grateful to the people who gave me those. So thank you if you're listening. But at the same time, it's put this pressure on, like, oh yeah, so I should post, and I should post something good because I haven't posted in a while. And I should, it's all turned into like shoulds instead of what do I want to do.
I think I know what you mean, because even with I think I've talked about this before, but just we have the expectation of thinking, well, certain things have been done before and this has proven successful. And then it also, the industry kind of has this as well. You're supposed to get a portfolio, you're supposed to make sure that your stuff is marketable and usable for companies. But in doing that, you don't really listen to yourself. And for me, even with my screaming faces, Sagar, you've told me many times, during VFS, like your screaming faces are trying to say something. You're trying to express something. Yeah. But I would never really listen to that. And we have this thing where it's just like our intuitive side has something to say. It has something to express, but we're bogged down by the others, I suppose the left brain or something like that, trying to impose what it thinks is logic, and it's just, and it doesn't help that the left one is the one that governs language, right? It's like it's the one that tries to make sense of the world, whereas the intuitive side doesn't really know how to speak in terms of language. It'll try to express itself through gut feeling, through an innate sense of like, oh, you're aligned with something right. But it's so hard to get to that because the world, by its definition, tries to function on logic, even though we aren't creatures of logic at all.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like I feel like when you start, or when most people start and they want to have a career in art, it tends to be something pretty concrete. Like, I want to draw the thing I like. And then it quickly turns into, but I don't know if there's a thing that, like, I don't know if I could make a living off that. So then you look for the thing that you could make a living off, that you see other people making a living off. And then you go to that thing. So what I want to draw is, or what I want to be is, well, for me it would be, I just want to draw faces. And, well, just draw faces, that doesn't really work. So what about portraiture, where you paint people's portraits? It's like, I guess that's close. Or, but then it's like, yeah, but I want to draw from imagination. Oh, well, do you want to be a concept artist then? Do you want to be a character designer? Do you want to be... It's like we find the career that is closest to our thing, and then we go according to that. And, I mean, do you think...
Yeah, I think there's this pull towards finding a legitimate avenue for your art. I think there's this tendency to look to what's already been done. Where is my market, instead of how will I create my own market? How will I create my audience? Where should I go? Where should I look up to for advice or guidance? Or who are my predecessors? Instead of, yeah, I'm going to do this thing and it's going to be my opinion.
I suppose there's an inherent sense of panic, especially if you're going to commit yourself to doing something. And I'd imagine it'd probably be even more difficult if you had prior responsibilities, like I'm going to quit my job to do this thing or whatever. And then when you go through with this decision, you're trying to commit to it. It's just like, okay, well, now what? What am I supposed to do in order to make this thing work?
Yeah.
And then and because of that, it's just like, what do we fall back on? Prior experience. What if there is no prior experience? Well, other people must have had this experience.
Yeah.
And it's a safety net. It's like you think, well, this has proven to be successful, therefore I will follow it. But the inherent trap of that is, this person who did this, maybe they did follow a formula and they did get it to work, but they still have their own individual way of doing it that fits them. And then for you to try to do that, it's like, yeah, it might work to a certain degree, but you're not pushing yourself to your full limit. You're not experiencing where you can fully go. It's more risky to do that, but it's like, if you commit to it and you succeed, it's like you're going down a path that hasn't really been trodden upon, and because of that, you're more unique, you're more interesting.
Yeah, but how often does the impulse for making art even consider that? In the beginning phases, like, I'm drawing. You're not thinking about, precedence or, like, everything that is associated, or almost everything that's usually been associated with art as a career is usually bad experience. You're going to be a starving artist. You're going to be this. It's going to be a struggle. It's going to be hard. And that gets layered and layered, culturally speaking, until you're like, I'm going to be an artist. I'm super scared.
Yeah. Or then it's, you find someone who reassures you and says, no, you can be an artist. I'm an artist and I'm not starving. I'm making a lot of money. But then it's, they're already in their path.
Yeah.
So then you're really drawn towards whatever path they have.
Yeah, following in their footsteps. But initially, there's no, I'm just drawing. I'm expressing something. I'm creating something that's so devoid of all the expectations, of all the implications. That's so pure in its original form. And then it gets so easily muddled up by societal, expectations or...
Maybe that's why it's so good to just, like for me anyways, like one of the reasons why I was able to just get better is like I returned to those formative years when I was young and just let that side of myself be explored. And I'm just wondering, it's just like, well, I'd imagine for people who have gone through that during their childhood, it might be easier to access that. But for people who haven't really gone through that, it probably is more difficult, I'd imagine.
Not really.
Really?
No, it was fine. Once it was very similar to when you started drawing Screaming Faces and then you started evolving pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like, okay, you were doing anatomy studies, you were doing all your studies at first, and you were evolving, but like, okay, because it's you were evolving faster than most people. Mm-hmm. However, when you started indulging your own, your desire to draw Screaming Faces, you improved drastically. Mm-hmm. And when I just started drawing faces and not, you should draw this or should draw that, I improved way, way, way faster. than before.
Is it that like the brain is less bogged down? It's like, okay, you're doing something that you inherently like, so then instead of your brain going like, well, you should do this, you should do that, like trying to make plans and using resources to get things done, all your brain is focused on is doing this one task.
Yeah.
All your brain power is using it, and you're getting better because of that.
Yeah, it's like all the energy you have is going towards one thing, whereas if you're drawing something you don't want to do, or pursuing anything that you don't want to do, you might have a motivation to do that. Like, oh, I should do this because I'll make money. And it's like, okay, that's good. I'll be stable. My parents won't think I'm a failure. Or my teacher who said I'll never make it, I'll show them. There's a degree of motivation in that. Like, sure, there's some energy for that. But then there's the huge amount of energy that's like, maybe it's unconscious, but it's like, I don't want to do this. I don't enjoy doing this. And so you're dragging this kid who's just dragging their feet, and it's slowing you down. It's like, whereas otherwise, if you're working with this child inside you, they're just running free. What is
It's
this?
just child labor.
Yeah, well, it's not labor if the kid's playing.
I was thinking about it more like the Enterprise engines. Like, if they're aligned, if they're parallel, it's the most efficient way to get ahead. But if you angle them towards each other or away from each other...
Yes. It's like the nacelles on the Enterprise.
Yeah.
If they're parallel, you'll go faster than if they're at an angle.
Where no man has gone before.
So, yeah.
But I think when you're drawing, you're already committed to your inner child's goal of drawing. And when you're superimposing another goal, you're just adding more in another direction. So it takes away from whatever you have to spend, whatever you have to give to art.
Yeah.
It gives it to expectation and worry and fear and I don't know.
Mm-hmm. So I think the moral of the story is feed your child.
Go down the basement every once in a while and give her some breadcrumbs.
Is that what we haven't been doing, Bob?
Well, now you know, everybody.
We've forgotten to do that.
So, anyway, yeah. So do something that you really like. And then when you're studying other stuff, if you want to, it really helps if it's attached to that thing. So, again, I said I like drawing faces, but bodies are attached to that, so that's nice. I mean, not directly to the face.
Not in Bob's drawings.
Yeah, but like it's just easier to build off something you enjoy than to build off something you think you should be doing. And it's very common for me to talk to artists who have as their goal, I want to, and then they will say something like that is sort of like, I want to work on a big movie, or I want to be on the cover of a magazine or something like that, where it's kind of like, okay, but that doesn't say anything about you really as an individual. Whereas if it's just, I want to draw, I mean, whatever it is in your case, in my case, it's like, I want to draw faces and expressions and have life and personality. That's something. So
yeah, that makes sense.
So with what's going on in the background, we have some drawing from you, Bob. Care to talk a little bit about that? What is this?
Well, it's a comic idea that I've been doing. I'm not sure if you can see the top left corner title for what it says. It says "No Face Clown," and that's exactly what it is. I don't really have a proper title for it yet, but yeah, it's just an idea that I've had in my mind. I've had some images in my head that I've been wanting to draw. I haven't really thought of making it into a comic before, but I figured this would probably be a pretty good challenge just to see, it's like, okay, what's it like making a comic? What's it like just carrying it to its finishing point or something like that? And I've had a little bit of experience with comic before, and it's starting out from scratch, because before we did, I think Simon and I did a comic and we worked off a script. But this time I'm pretty much developing it on my own. So it's challenging because you have to organize everything. You have to go, okay, what does the character look like? If there's going to be characters in the background, what do they look like? And basically, I'm just exploring ideas. But I also have to be careful with the ideas because like one idea might lead off into a dozen other ideas, and then it might just go on forever. So there's a point where I have to figure out, it's like, okay, at what point is this just impractical or impractical? And, that's basically what I'm doing with this. So I guess you guys are getting a sneak peek with the drawings.
Yeah. Are you gonna do anything with this comic? Are you?
Yeah, I'm probably gonna post some of the images on DeviantArt. I think I might show more behind the scenes with the Patreon or something like that, just to see how that goes.
Fancy.
Yeah, fancy.
So, the way you're doing it, is this, like, you haven't started from a script, so you're just kind of winging it, right?
Yeah, well, because I don't really know what's the proper way of doing it, but I figured instead of just looking up what's the proper way of doing it, it's like, okay, let me just start off and I'll organize it on the fly, I suppose. So, okay, figure out what works and figure out what doesn't. And when I hit a block, it's like, okay, where do I go from here? That's when it's like, oh, and now it's time to go back to the notes. Now it's time to organize things instead of just trying to draw it out with thumbnails or concepts and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty neglected thing, is drawing, like, taking a risk and screwing up is good in a way, especially when you're starting, because you get a crash course in what to do and what mistakes you make or what you need help on.
Yeah. I suppose that's a pretty good way of going into the idea of consequence, because we fear consequence so much. Or at least me, I fear consequence quite a bit. That I try to avoid it. But in doing so, you kind of deprive yourself of a lesson, I guess. I'm sure there's lots of people out there who tell you, it's like, no, you need to fail and stuff like that. In this case, it's like, so yeah, I need to find out. It's just like, okay, what's going to work, what's not going to work when I'm doing this. And then that way, I don't know, just learn more just by doing it yourself. Because the impulse these days for me, and I think for a lot of other people, is to just go online. You go online, you search for all the answers, and then you try to look for the one that, you think works for you, or you cherry picked. And it's very tempting to do that, but once again, you're depriving yourself of going through the mistakes yourself. Just figuring out, it's like, okay, I tried this, it failed, I tried this, I succeeded. And you get a lot of intuitive nuance from this, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's probably one of the worst things about all this information is just that it's hard to rely on your own instincts because there's someone else who has actual knowledge and experience who you could just learn from rather than going through it yourself. And it almost seems dumb to try yourself because, well, why bother when you can just look up a tutorial of someone who actually knows what they're doing?
Yeah. That's kind of a trap, right? Yeah. It's like, okay, you think you've gotten this knowledge, and it's like you don't understand. You haven't stored that into your deep subconscious part of the brain. It's like it's not in your muscle memory. It's not in your subconsciousness. It's in your conscious mind, and you think you feel as though you've learned something, but really you haven't. You just think you did, and you have to apply that knowledge in order for it to sink in.
It's not that different from that learning of expressions that you were mentioning, right?
What do you mean?
When you're learning a language you learn an expression and you can use that expression and
like
you can't
really the single
wield
phrase,
the language,
but you don't really know. Yeah,
you can't operate with the tool because it's not your tool. It's sort of like if somebody gave an Aboriginal high-end smartphone. You haven't gotten through all the stages to know how to use that tool.
That means something different in Canada.
What?
Well, we have Aboriginals, but they're normal people. They're not like
Aboriginals?
Yeah. That's what they're called. The natives are called Aboriginal people.
I thought they were the ones in what's that country? New Zealand?
You mean Australia?
No, New Zealand.
Those are Aborigines, and I think they're in Australia.
Okay.
Wait, what did you mean by Aboriginals?
I meant those, like those secluded cultures, you know, the tribes.
Oh. Okay, is that what it means?
I thought so. As far as I know.
I just know it went from calling them, like, American Indians to natives to Aboriginal people.
Oh.
For us, anyway.
I didn't know about this development in language.
Yeah. You had a point.
Yeah.
What was your point?
The definition for it is an adjective of human races, animals, and plants inhabiting or existing in a land from the earliest times or from before the arrival of colonists or indigenous. So yeah, I was referring to the before the arrival of the colonists
Okay.
thing.
Oh, okay.
That's fine then.
I did not know about these new developments.
Yeah, I just don't want any natives watching to be like, yeah, I know how to use a smartphone. Oh, in Princeton. Okay, so this is off topic,
Okay.
but I pretty much, like, I moved to Vancouver in 1992, so probably a while back for most of y'all. Anyway, and I hadn't heard Canadians really. You know, like the...
You know, eh?
You know, eh? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go about this and find out what's wrong, eh?
You're missing a few A's.
Yeah. So, and then I thought it was just this weird made-up thing that Americans said. Because they would have this... There's this thing where Americans always say, I'm Canadian, eh? And I didn't... Like, why are you saying that? We don't... No one I've ever heard speaks that way. But they do.
Yeah, they do.
I
They do.
heard
We've
them
met
now.
them. We've met them.
Yeah.
And they're
it's-
nice, eh?
They're real nice.
That's another thing we've heard.
Yeah.
They're real nice.
Yeah. We heard, Flavia, that your hair is foxy.
Oh, foxy. My hair's foxy.
And we're hooped.
Yeah. And we heard about jammers.
Our town only has 2,000 people.
And all of them are characters.
Yeah, they're very interesting people.
Every single one of them.
It's very nice, I guess, in some ways.
In some ways. There's a
little bit racist.
little bit racist.
A little bit racist.
Lots of
Especially
stairs.
towards the
Some of
deer.
them. Some of them.
Especially towards the deer. There's a $3,000 fine if you feed a deer.
Yeah, but you can't say that you did. But
Yeah,
let's just say if you had,
if you had,
then it would be a $3,000
Yeah.
fine.
if,
But of course you haven't.
of course.
Nothing like that ever happened.
Nothing like that ever happened. But the deer are nice, and they're not racist.
They poo in front of our window.
Right
Deer.
in front of our window. They
Just-
poo outside of Bob's window, most of them.
They look like Glossette raisins, the poo does, so...
Yeah. They're glimmering in the snow.
Oh, so they're good looking poo.
Yeah. Handsome poo.
I didn't say that. I said they look like Glossette raisins.
Raisins. Okay.
Whatever. Anyway, so what were you talking about? Art stuff?
Art stuff? You mean like deer?
No, we were talking about how before the Aboriginals,
For the Aboriginals, there were tools that you don't know how to use because you have watched videos of somebody figuring out an art problem before figuring out yourself the same art problem.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Just, basically figure stuff out yourself. Go online less. Do what
Stay
you
online
like.
less.
Do what you like, even if it means you have a job that you don't for a while. And it pays off.
Yeah.
Good lessons.
I think the more you know, the less you can say, other than keep doing this or remember to be yourself, or
Yeah.
just gets reduced more and more to like axioms.
Yeah. I feel that way. I feel like when I was starting teaching, I don't know what it was, making videos. When I started making videos, I felt like, I have so much to tell everybody. Oh, no thanks. But now, I feel like I have nothing to say to anybody besides just draw. It's like, how do you get better? Draw. Yeah, but I want to paint. Yeah, draw. Everything is just draw.
And then I've drawn. Keep drawing.
Keep drawing. It's not enough.
It's not enough.
Draw more.
Yeah.
You're just gonna be that guy.
Yeah. But at the same time, that's really all I can think. It's like when I look at their work, it's usually, if left to their own devices and people are just drawing, it's like, yeah, keep drawing. However, I do have some people who are following this. Like on the Psychro.net forum, there are people who are just doing this. They're just drawing for fun. And I'll give a special shout out to Teleporte, who is, he has a sketchbook on the forum. And a bunch of guys, Kozlik and others, they're just drawing their butts off. And they're
on.
Drawing their butts on. What does it mean? Oh,
They're
you draw
drawing
your own butt.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jeff.
No.
You gotta figure out how to do that. Sorry. Anyway, they're doing good, and they're just drawing for fun, but they're having huge improvement. And they're just drawing a ton. And the idea is, for people who are, like, this is pretty much just for people who are not like you, Jeff. Bob. People who don't have that accumulated mileage. If you want to, the first thing I would say before learning anatomy and proportions and perspective and all of that fundamentals is draw for fun enough that you're comfortable with it.
Put the fun back in fundamentals.
Yeah. And stop putting the dumb in fundamentals. And mental.
Yeah, mental. That was my next thing. It's like, oh, you either put the fun in or you just have the mental.
I'm having fun. I'm having dumb. I'm having mental.
Jokes.
Yeah, I think that's maybe just having it as a habit. You know, just like drawings. It's not even something that you think it's like, oh, I have to do drawing today. So, no, I'm just going to do drawing. It's like, make it into a habit. Make it into something you just do.
When it's something fun, you'll do it a lot. And then do the whole, okay, now I'm going to learn stuff as well.
Yeah.
Because, of course, you need to do that. You need the fundamentals. I'm really afraid of all the things I say now because I'm worried about style is important. Then everyone like, how do I get it? I'm trying to get a style now.
Yeah, some people will get it tattooed on their back. Style is important, and then you're like, no, I mean fun. It's like, there's no more room on my back for this.
Because what I mean is not forsake the fundamentals, but make sure fun is in the front of fundamentals. I
gotcha. There's a game that Sector likes to play. Whenever one of us tries to drink something, he's like, oh, make you laugh.
Yeah, and the outcome of that is that we will both die of dehydration.
But I don't. It's not.
That's how you
say,
got your
Bob.
skeleton. Who is that skeleton?
It's anyway.
That's not.
I don't plan when you guys are drinking. I just happen to be funny all the time. And sometimes it correlates to when you guys are drinking.
And us choking on the water is just it's just a fun bonus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're very quiet. No more laughing, Bob.
Okay.
Well, I was thinking, like, do you choke on water or you drown on water?
Technically, you choke. But I suppose if you're submerged,
it's drowning.
You drown.
Yeah. It has to be overwhelming water, right?
Overwhelming water.
I didn't get it.
Water overwhelming.
Oh,
StarCraft thing, I think.
Yeah. All right. So back to art topics.
What were we saying before? Something about fundamentals, habit. Oh yeah. I think both of us have gotten this thing where people come up to us and go like, oh, hey, we need you to critique us or something. And then they show you their drawing. You can tell. It's like, oh, you don't draw very often, do you? And then it's just,
Yeah. Draw a lot. Draw a ton. Draw so much that it stops being fun. No. All right. So we took a break. You won't notice it because we're just going to edit this in. But the previous video parts that we've already recorded were done yesterday. And this new part is today. So one of the reasons we took a break is we were getting tired. Figured it was good to take a break. And thought we'd start fresh in the morning. However, in that period, I guess I should explain something. So for the past couple of years, I've started to get startled by stuff. It started small. I'd see things moving, and then started having mild hallucinations of stuff, that's not there. And then it's been getting kind of worse over time, but it's been fine. It's just very mild. And then this time I just had a more severe case. So because of that, I'm kind of nervous and don't really know about how much I can talk. So I'm going to let Bob and Flavia do more of the talking.
Yeah.
I'm descending into madness.
No.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It's up to us to carry the torch to wherever.
Yeah.
To shine a light where no man has gone before. Alright, so there's something happening on the screen.
Yeah.
What is it, Bob?
These are the drawings and thumbnails that I was planning for the cover. Because I figure if this is a comic, I can't just start off with, whatever panels there are. It's like, okay, there has to be a comic. So these are some of the ideas that I was doing. And one of the things for the main character is that he uses masks because he doesn't really have an expression of his own. And that's how he sort of gets through life. And then I figure it's like, okay, well, I like the idea of just him having a bunch of masks. I don't know if he'll have different expression masks or if a lot of them will be the same or if it's just one mask, but I'm just exploring the idea right now, coming up with stuff with the thumbnails.
What's your character's name?
He doesn't really have a name right now. I just go with No Face Clown. Mm-hmm. I guess No Face would be easier to say, but there's already a character of that in Miyazaki's Spirited Away. Mm-hmm. So I just go with No Face Clown.
Mm-hmm. Do you usually have a bit of trouble naming your characters?
Quite a bit, yeah. I have a lot of difficulties. I think there was this one time when Psychro was showing me Final Fantasy VII, and it took me forever coming up with names. I told him that there would be I would be sometimes just stuck on the naming on the characters, and then I just wouldn't proceed with the game. Can't play the game. I can't play the game if I don't get the name.
They need me to name a character. This is gonna be too difficult.
Yeah.
So a name is very important to you.
I suppose so. It's easier for me now to just sort of skip over. It's just okay, if there's a default name for the character, then I can just skip over it, and that's fine. But if I get into my head that I want to name the character, then it becomes really difficult because I just don't know how to think up of certain things. For a while it was like that with my ideas when it comes to drawings. It's like I can't think of anything and I can't draw anything, etc.
But you got over that.
Yeah, I was able to get over that eventually.
So what does it mean to you when you say, if you think of the character, then you can't name them? What goes through your head? What are the... It's
like hitting a wall. It's like, okay, I need to do this in order to progress.
Because if you just called them Bob, it wouldn't be hard, right?
Yeah, but it feels like before I just decide to go with default names. It's just like, no, if I'm going to name this character, it can't just be some throwaway name.
Yeah, but why... okay, so it can't be a throwaway name, so then what are the criteria for how you would choose the name?
I think in terms of the Final Fantasy VII characters, they were very inappropriate. So I don't think I can. Yeah, I can't say a lot of them. But it's just like because I came into it with a little bit of mockery because it's just like, oh, I don't really care for like these anime characters. I don't really care for I guess just the characters overall, like with the big swords and everything. But that was before I started getting really impressed with Final Fantasy VII. I regret my choice.
And
now.
then you were stuck with a name.
Yeah, exactly. So then it's just like when I was playing, it's just like, oh, this is a really good game. I really like it. And then there's the really offensive names that come up whenever they talk. So I regretted that.
At least you're treating Final Fantasy VI better.
Yeah. I'm over the name thing now. But when I was doing it with the Final Fantasy VII characters, it's just like, oh, one, I'm mocking it. And two, I want it to be so that every time I see the names, they would be hilarious whenever somebody tries to say something about them. Oh, this character, and then their name comes up, and I would be like, oh, that's kind of a funny name.
What if you actually knew that you knew it was going to be good, and then you were naming them? Would you have done it the same way? If
I knew it was going to be good, I would have treated it with respect, and I would have not messed with anything.
Yeah, but what does it mean when you treat it with respect?
It means that I admire it, I like it, I know that.
Sure, but I mean, in terms of naming.
In terms of naming,
like, what's a respectful name versus a non-respectful name, and how do you choose the name of?
I suppose that's where I hit the wall. It's like I don't really know how to associate certain names with feelings. Like if you say the name Jeff or Jack or Jake or something like that, it's just like they all feel mundane. But if I were to try to put a character into that, it's like I can't really associate it with anything. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
It's too generic?
I guess, like, all I know is that I hit a wall, and then it's like I have no ideas when it comes to naming.
When you hear somebody's name, do you have an image of just hear somebody's name and not see their face? Do you have an idea of what Murray would look like?
I don't really know how to do that because there's this show called Murray, I think, and then it's kind of like I wouldn't say it's exactly like Seinfeld. No, not Seinfeld. What's Jerry Springer? There we go.
Oh, Maury.
Yeah,
Maury Povich.
No, it's this Canadian show where it's just like they do the lie detector thing. It's just you are.
That's Maury.
Oh, okay, that's what I think.
Pretty sure.
Okay. But yeah, I can associate feelings with and images with names. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So.
Sorry for that brief interruption. The cat was drinking Jeff's water. I'll get you some new water.
It's fine.
You've been plundered. All right,
I've been PC-cooled.
So back to that.
Yeah.
Back to what we were talking about.
With the clowns? And
with the clowns. So you have difficulty associating names with certain feelings. What happens in your comic so far? It looks like there's a clown and he needs to put on different masks for different feelings, basically.
Or just dealing with certain situations in life. Thanks.
Yeah. And from knowing you, I've noticed that there's a bit of a parallel between what goes on in your comics that you just made up on the fly, and what has gone on in your life, in your real life so far. So, care to share a bit of history on that?
Where should I start? My birth?
Start with your birth. Start at the origin.
Well, my parents, they went through a very intimate process. And thus, I was conceived.
Can you describe the process?
But anyways, so they had me. I'm a pretty tall person, like far above the average height, and the cats. But yeah, I'm pretty big, so when I was getting ready to be born, I was too big to...
You were packing your suitcases.
Yeah. And I was too big to come out the normal way, through the normal entrance, so they had to cut me out through my mother's belly. I don't know, something happened, so apparently I was in there for longer than I was supposed to be. I don't know if there are any adverse effects, but apparently, like, I came out and then they took me out and then they do the bum smacking thing and I didn't really cry. I was kind of like, I was very weak or something like that.
Oh, I thought you were just stoic, like you usually are. I'm not gonna cry.
No, I'm not gonna do anything. But yeah, that's how that happened. And apparently things were pretty normal for a little while. And then I think when I was 2 years old or something, my parents, they were off to work. And then I was apparently crawling through the kitchen. I pulled something and then boiling hot water hit my face. And then my grandmother was there at the time. And basically I got pretty intense burns. I got rushed to the hospital and everything. They had to give me a lot of doses of penicillin. So maybe that's why I'm allergic to penicillin. Yeah, and then the way they treated me was apparently, like, I have no memory of this, but apparently it was very painful. Every time they changed bandages, they'd be ripping off skin from my face. It was apparently so painful that, like, my grip was able to draw blood from my father's arm. After that, yeah, I guess it affected my parents pretty badly. And I know my grandmother mentioned that she wanted to kill herself because of the shame, because my father started yelling at my grandmother. And from there, I guess that's just sort of how life was. Like, I don't remember any pains. Like, I don't remember anything happening during that time. I do know that especially when I was really young in China, I really did not like warm temperatures or hot water. Mm-hmm. So I really didn't like that.
You were too sensitive to it. So before the accident with the burn happened, mm-hmm. you were just a normal, social, whatever kid.
Yeah. I was very normal from what I've
Do you remember being more extroverted or more introverted?
Before or after?
Before.
No memory. And then my parents don't really know much either.
Mm. So, let's say you were pretty, like, on your way to being either an extrovert or an introvert. You were being a sort of mainstream character. Mm-hmm. And then after the burn, you had to deal with a lot of pain, a lot of anxiety in your family, a lot of shame, guilt, and just trauma. Mm-hmm. But you don't remember any of the pain.
No.
However, in your images, since you started drawing the screaming faces a couple of years back, or more than a couple of years back, how long has it been since you've been drawing?
As long as I can remember, really. I've always been drawing screaming faces. Maybe I only started sometime, because I distinctly remember even during elementary school I was drawing it. Mm-hmm. But earlier I don't know if I was, just because, like, maybe I just didn't have access to the proper paper and pencils and stuff like that, or maybe I was still drawing scribbles. But
so in the past years, it's not just that you've started drawing screaming faces, but that you've started giving them more airtime.
Yeah.
So your consciousness doesn't seem to hang on to the pain, but your unconscious and subconscious seem to just be churning it out, the screams that you never got to remember.
So yeah, that's how it was. That I remember my parents talking about how before I seemed like a very normal, active baby, but after I got very skinny, and I guess I was just more morose, just like, not as active as I used to be. But I think during that time I was a pretty active kid. Like, I tried to play with other kids and everything, but it's just socially I never got along with them. I think even then I was missing a lot of social cues about what was going on.
Yeah, because I remember you showed us a picture of you during the hospital time, and we noticed that you had a light in your eye and you were, like, more just normal.
I think maybe because there's this other girl that got pretty bad burns as well. Mm-hmm. So maybe it was the fact that I was with other kids and then I was playing around. But there was shortly after that, maybe even a year or so later, you saw pictures of me and the light was kind of already gone in the eyes.
The stone-faced Bob had emerged.
Yeah. So yeah, that's that. I remember my parents fighting a lot, Sometimes to the point of physical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't very often, but it would get pretty intense.
So you were exposed to violence, just physical, verbal.
A lot of it was verbal. Yeah, there's just a lot of aggression there.
Mm-hmm.
I remember even back then, my mother was trying to manipulate me. It's just like my parents would have a fight. There'd be a lot of tension, and then my mother would just bring me out to maybe the staircase or something, because it's just outside the door basically. And then she'd tell me these stories about how, the mother goes through all these suffering, and the mother loses the child, and the father is this evil figure or something like that. So even then, she was doing some pretty not respectable things. I didn't understand it at the time, but yeah. Sometime I did a lot of bad things to other kids, to animals.
So
yeah.
So you experienced manipulation, and at the time, what was your reaction to it?
I don't know. I took it literally. It's just like my mother is telling me this really sad story, and then it made me feel sympathetic towards her.
And when did you sort of realize that this was to some further goal?
Not for a while. At least not when I was still in China, or when I was coming to Canada. Yeah, I still didn't realize it.
And why did you come to Canada?
I don't know. I remember my parents saying they wanted to seek operations for my face to get it recovered, because when I got burned, they wanted to. The doctors recommended getting some skin from my leg or my bum and then putting it on my face. My parents refused for some reason. I don't really know why. Maybe they didn't just want me to have a butt face. It's like, Bob, you will always be butt face to us. Never be ashamed of your heritage.
What's that on your face? It's my cheek. Care to elaborate? No.
Ow. Oh, jeez. But yeah, that's the reason they told me. Sometimes I wonder if maybe they understood that I was having difficulties in China, because even when I was really young, I was pretty social. Like, I would talk to other kids, but I wouldn't get along with them. And there was a lot of things even during that age that I wasn't really understanding, picking up in terms of social cues and stuff like that.
But that was like after the burn, basically. Did your social group change? Did you have like?
I think I was too young for me to have any other social group. I was 2 years old when I got the burn. I wasn't even conscious then.
And then years later, sort of a certain type of characters started to appear in your drawings.
Yeah. Screaming faces.
And marionettes. And
They didn't make an appearance until recently, maybe even a few years ago.
And what happened a few years ago?
I guess I started just exploring what screaming faces meant to me.
And before that, you had a different attitude towards them?
Yeah, I denied their existence. I didn't think
this
they
face
were...
is not screaming.
Like, they were screaming, but it's just... Because my parents and my extended family and a lot of other Chinese kept on saying, why don't you draw anything else? You always draw these ugly things over and over. An artist needs to be able to draw multiple things. My mother specifically told me, what's the word? 魔鬼, which means demon or evil ghost or something. And then she says, "Oh, you're drawing those demons again or something." And, she's pretty superstitious and religious, so there's that.
So you could say that. Oh, the faces were screaming, but you couldn't hear them before.
I suppose so. I mean, I just didn't think they were important. I just thought they were just repetitive. It's like, oh, this is all I know how to draw. This is there's nothing special about this. If I'm going to be an artist, I need to do things other than my screaming faces.
Yeah, and from the outside looking in, it's like, oh, here's my friend Bob, and all he draws are screaming faces. This might mean something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried to bring it up. That didn't go well.
Yeah, I denied it quite strongly.
Hey Jeff, Bob, why are you drawing screaming faces? Where do you think these come from?
They're not important. It's nothing.
It's nothing.
Yeah. Just dumb drawings.
And then a couple of years back, or a few years ago, you started doing more and more, and then you started exploring just with the art, or did you start to think more about things as well?
I think it started off with art just because like I was getting really bored, and then I was just really tired with my own art just because I didn't feel as though it was going anywhere. Because for the longest time, I thought, you know, like I had this, I think in VFS, I had this obsession with like doing something meaningful with art. Like it has to be good. It has to be really original. There has to be integrity behind it, but I could never achieve that with my drawings. Like the best I could do was sort of like cartoonish characters. There's this character called Jacques Noir, and then he was like the best one that I had at the time. But I could never do anything that I felt was meaningful with my art, something that deserved respect. And then I guess maybe somewhere along the way with that feeling and boredom, I eventually just thought, why don't I just do screaming faces? Why don't I just try it out and let me explore? And then I just started exploring the shapes. So like, let me try drawing the screaming faces in this shape. Let me exaggerate it. Somewhere along the way, the screaming faces mutated more and more. And then I got bored of them. And then I became very depressed because it's just like I felt so, if I guess this is what is important. I guess this is meaningful with my art. And then when I got bored with them, it's just like, well, I have to find something else to draw. And then somewhere along the way, I stumbled upon clowns. And then at first I was bored with them, but as I drew them more and more, they started to evolve. And then along the way, I was also drawing these doll-like characters. Like
The marionettes.
Marionettes, yeah. Something resonated with me with them, I guess. I suppose that once again it has something to do with my life.
Yeah, there's a lot of symbolism that links what has gone on with you. Because I know you tend to have low self-esteem, and you tend to sort of make a joke out of yourself before anything else. Like the first butt of the joke is gonna be you. Oh, I'm this, I'm that, I'm not good. I might as well make a funny movement, and that relates very well to the clowns. And as for the marionettes, I know that from your talks with me, I know that your life has been pretty much led by other people, be it your parents or whatever was going on around you, and you didn't really have that much agency until recently. And when I met you, you were doing the screaming faces, and you were doing those triptychs with the screaming faces, and then they were just morphed into one another and stuff, and I thought, that is the thing. Because I'd seen your art before, but as you said, I thought it was like, yeah, it's good, but what else? And then when I saw the screaming faces, like, there is more to this. There is more life behind this drawing. And as you showed us your sketchbook more and more, they sort of morphed into getting more features, getting bodies, getting like, before they were sort of like fetuses, screaming fetuses, because they had no real body, or if they did, it was very atrophied. And then they started developing a bigger body, and eventually clothing and like different expressions. And now leading up to a comic you're doing about a clown who is employing tools to get on with life, to be a part of, I guess, society, part of everyday life, and how to deal with.
With the clown character, the character didn't really come, just out of nowhere exactly. It was more that I'd already drawn clown characters, and then somewhere along the way I stumbled upon masks. So then this character has been around for quite a while, but I suppose with making a comic out of it, it's I had to solidify him more. So it's just like, okay, where does he live exactly? What's his environment? Because I've had an image in my head of this character just sitting somewhere. He's surrounded by masks and just looking at it, just like, okay, what am I going to wear today, or something like that.
Is that in any way, can you trace that back to something you feel consciously throughout your life?
I guess at the time I didn't think there was anything like that, but
Of course.
yeah. But now that I'm doing the comic and I'm actively seeing the links between my characters and my past, I suppose it's just I have a lot of difficulty just understanding social things. I don't know if it's this way biologically or if it's because of the way I was raised, or maybe just because I've had to escape into my head to avoid reality, I suppose. And because of that, I missed a lot of social interactions. I miss a lot of social cues. I have difficulty understanding instructions.
I know you have some difficulty with expressions in particular.
Yeah, I suppose I have a lot of difficulty expressing myself. There were a lot of times, even when I was a teenager, it's just like, okay, I go to a new school where it's a new year, and I'm just like thinking, what am I supposed to act? Am I supposed to be more social? Am I supposed to be more by myself? Like, it's just like, okay, what am I supposed to try out this year or something in order to get through everything?
What mask am I putting on this time?
Yeah. They weren't very well made masks. They were, yeah. But yeah. I suppose that's how it relates to this character, and that's how it's expressing itself subconsciously.
Yeah, I always thought that your art was at its best when it was expressing something from within. Because you have a lot that's meant to be expressed, that you need to be expressed. You have a lot of anxiety, you have a lot of insecurity, you have a lot of aggression, you have a lot of trauma and pain and longing. But through your persona, you're pretty stoic, you're pretty inactive physically or expressively, so it has to come out somewhere. And because you were able to explore it with your art, from what I know, some deeper thinking followed, right?
Yeah. You, like, what do you mean by deeper thinking?
Like, I remember a year or two ago, we started talking more about how you were exploring your own thoughts and thought process and the reasons why you think a certain way, your patterns, your...
I think maybe I just started acknowledging a bit of what I went through. Because for the longest time, I didn't feel as though I've gone through suffering. It's like, it's like, oh, what suffering am I going through? It's nothing. I have a home, I have food, I have shelter over my head. I have my father to look after me. And, whatever I've gone through, my parents have gone through so much worse, which I still in a way feel. And I suppose maybe just acknowledging the things that I've went through allowed me to explore things more. Just to realize it's like I've gone through trauma. I have been psychologically damaged. Which I have to remind myself every now and then, because it's like it's very easy for me to fall into, oh yeah, I didn't go through anything. It's just like, oh, this isn't anything bad, but it's like sometimes there are moments of clarity where it's just like, oh, my behaviors are not normal. My drawings are not normal.
So you find it very, very easy to dismiss your own suffering?
Yep.
Have there been other people in your life who have done that to you?
Yep. My father. He's always saying, oh, our life isn't the best, but it's not that bad. And he'd always tell me about the harshness that he has to go through. He grew up during a very bad time in China. A lot of people were starving. A lot of poor people. A lot of people died from starvation. His father specifically, which might explain why he has such difficulty being a parent, just because he's never really had a parent as well. Because you were not really cared for emotionally, you internalized that and started not caring for yourself emotionally. Probably, yeah. Luckily that your art got the better of you. Well, I met good people. They were able to help me. I wonder who those were. Yeah.
Social workers?
Oh yeah, they were real helpful.
What was that like?
Social workers?
Yeah.
They didn't really know what they were doing.
How did you go about meeting social workers? Did you go on a dating site?
Well, I never realized this, but even during elementary school, there were signs that apparently I was not normal. Because I was drawing screaming faces and violent stuff, and then people noticed, and I started talking to social workers, and then they would just ask me, "Oh, how are things? You know, are you okay?" And then we started having these therapy talks. I didn't think of anything at the time. I just thought, "Oh, I'm just talking to this person. Oh, I get to vent out my dumb kid things." Which really weren't anything all that exciting.
Did it help at the time?
I don't think so, because I didn't know what I was going through. I was pretty ignorant and very immature for my age. I was very
Were you dismissing your own suffering back then as well? As
I don't think I even knew I was suffering. It was just normal. You know, coming to Canada, parents splitting up, my mother being crazy, for a lack of a better word. I just thought that was just oh, that's just these things are happening. There's no significance behind them. So
yeah, that's a very detached way, or seemingly detached way of looking at it. But if you look at your inner turmoil, it's no, it's very active. It's very active and reactive and very sensitive to that. Yeah. However, on the outside, it's oh, things were happening, you're very dissociated from your life.
Oh, I suppose maybe it had to do with just I was told by you guys, basically, that it's just oh, moving to another country is already pretty damaging.
Yeah. And
there were always things happening around me that I had no control over. And in China, there was one point where my mother left and went to, I guess, the States. She wanted to go to the States first, but she failed and she ended up in Canada. But for me, it was just my mother's gone. What the fuck? What's going on? I had a parent, I had a mother, and now she's gone.
How old were you?
I don't know, 3, 4. She came back once for a little while, and then I got pretty happy. And then after a little while, she left, and I was just what the hell? You know, she's here now, she's gone. What's going on here?
How long was she gone for the first time?
I don't know. I didn't really know how to keep track of time back then. It was just just things were happening, and then I just go through with things. So, yeah, she was gone, and then by the time we finally, my father and I finally made it to Canada, I was pretty detached from my mother. Just whereas before I had a pretty strong emotional response, now I didn't. She just ran up to me and started hugging me, and it's oh, there's this woman hugging me. What's going on? I don't feel anything. And then pretty soon after that, things got kind of bad between the friends. Yeah.
So, with everything that happened after you moved to Canada, you had to work a great deal to adjust, and you didn't always succeed in adjusting to school, to everyday life, to I don't know, just the requirements of things. And I know that you had a lot of difficulty. You said you have difficulty understanding instructions, and from what I know from you, you've had several normal jobs, which you've had trouble keeping. How did that sort of come about? What happened? What was...
Well, when I was 15 or 14 years old, my father basically said, it's time for you to work now. You have to get a job. And then he made me make a resume, and then he started telling me to go into these places to get jobs. My very first normal job was at a YMCA thing. It was a volunteer thing. But then the YMCA wouldn't pay me. It was the place that I was going to that would pay me. So I worked at an art gallery, putting stuff in envelopes. I didn't realize how bad I was at it at the time, but it's just it was just a stressful new thing. But then by the time I got another job at this burger place, that's when I really started finding out just how difficult it was for me to follow instructions. Orders would be coming up, and then I'd get confused, and then say, oh, I thought I did something right, but it turned out there was this other burger or this other order where I missed something. The people there really didn't like me because my personality back then was really annoying. And yeah, it was just frustrating for them to work around me. One of the supervisors basically told me at one point, "Why don't you just quit?" And
what was it about your personality that was annoying, or what do you think, or what
I suppose like I had an ego. It's just like, and Sarah can attest to this, but I had a pretty big ego in VFS, which was I put myself down, but I also have like this grand idea about like, no, you must do art with integrity. You have to be original, stuff like that. So I kind of had that as well. So I kind of had this big ego about myself, things like, oh, I'm somebody with integrity or something. But then I'm super incompetent. I miss social cues. Very obnoxious in terms of my voice level because I didn't really know how to regulate it. So people just didn't like being around me. It's like all those bad things would have been okay if I acknowledged that I was like, oh, I'm this very clumsy person, but I had an arrogance behind it, so you know, people just found me insufferable.
So you had an inner idea that you don't quite fit in, but in a good way. Like you are supposed to do more than what you're doing right now. However, that still doesn't really account for you going to VFS, to Vancouver Film School. You went to VFS because
my father made me.
So it wasn't a show of your agency, even though you had your thoughts of being great and doing art and.
Well, it's like by the time VFS rolled around, I didn't have that anymore. I was feeling pretty nihilistic. I think I told you I read this thing by what was it, Albert Camus or something, and it was about this guy who was very detached from things, very nihilistic, and then that's something about that really connected to me at the time, and I felt as though, oh yeah, I'm detached from reality, nothing matters, there's no meaning. At the time I was thinking, oh, it was my destiny to die and never exist, that kind of stuff. So when my father came around and made me go to VFS, I was like, I had no real purpose. But getting into VFS, the one good thing it did for me was that it got me back in touch with my art. And that's when the intuitive side of my skills started expressing itself. So it's like, okay, I was starting to find a little bit of purpose, but it wasn't inner purpose, it was external purpose. So yeah.
I know at the time you had a very strong attachment to your dad in terms of...
Well, I hero worship him. I thought he was the strongest person I knew. I thought he would always go on these rants about how things should be done. The Canadians aren't efficient. Stuff about white people and native people. So there was a bit of racism thrown in there as well. Patriotism as well.
And for some years, your mom had been pretty much out of the picture. Like ever since you detached from her emotionally when she went to America, and up until VFS, she was not really around. So for you, your dad was both mother and father.
Yeah.
And then what happened after you got into VFS? What was your life like?
I felt kind of intimidated because I was walking along the hall and they were showing me life drawings from other students, and they would always pick the best one just to show off. So at the time, I got the impression that VFS was this place where good artists were. So I just had this panicky feeling that I needed to catch up. I needed to get better. I needed to push myself. So there was a lot of external motivation at the time. Yeah. It ran out pretty quickly after we saw the graduating films of the previous class. And I just saw that they weren't good. They weren't people of integrity, of taste. And then I just got demotivated pretty quickly.
From the stories I heard, your first film, your first task for VFS was a frog.
Yeah.
And you were pretty motivated to do that.
Tell
us the story?
It wasn't the first one.
Yeah.
Which one was it?
It was there. We had assignments. One of the first few ones was a bouncing bag or bean or something like that. Ball. Okay, it was a ball, and then it was followed by some other stuff, and there was one where we were supposed to do something with
Jumping flour sack.
Flour sack, yeah, we had to do that. But then I think it was after that, or a little bit after that, we had this thing where we had to do a frog, and then I basically did overkill on it, and then I did because other people would just do frogs and they would do this funny thing. They would eat a cockroach or something. I did the frog jumping, and then a giant piece of machinery comes on with multiple television screens. They would flash, they would be static, and then it would flash frog eyes. They would all look at the cockroach, and then a metallic arm go off screen up into the air, come back into screen downwards, and then basically UFO abduct the cockroach. Then all the machinery would go back in, and then the frog ribbits. And that was it. And apparently it was super impressive.
Well, when he described it, it's like, okay. And then it came out of the frog's mouth, right?
Yeah.
Like, the frog opens its mouth, and then all this machinery comes out, and then it's got TVs, and then... Anyway, he was just talking about it, and the assignment is the frog jumps on the screen, and then shoots out its tongue, eats a cockroach, and then that's it.
Yeah.
And then looks at the camera and ribbits. And then, yeah, he was saying this, and everyone was like, no way. Like, there's... I think someone, was it Zen who bet you that you wouldn't be able to do
No, it was one of the supervisors.
Yeah, someone bet you that you wouldn't be able, like, there's no way you could do that.
Yeah, they put money on it, and I'm just like, fuck you, I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, and then he did it.
Yeah.
It was like, what? And before this, you weren't really standing out in class that much. Your work was like, because I remember the first time I saw your work, you had done like Avengers stuff.
Yeah, some stuff with Thor. I did start getting your attention when I started doing some of the compositions.
Yeah.
And people were really impressed with some of my shots for some reason. I never understood why. And
because they were good.
They got, for some of them I could say, yeah, okay, I can see why. But for one, they got really impressed with one that I felt was though it was just clunky and unreadable. But then they really liked it. I still don't understand why. But yeah, apparently I was starting after I started doing my own things. I started getting attention. And then after the frog, that really solidified my status for a while.
Was that the first time somebody activated your ego in VFS? Somebody challenged your ego and you were able to prove...
I think that was one of the big ones. There were times, because like, you know, there's usually one or two art kids in schools, and then people would be impressed by them, and usually I was known as the art kid. And then whenever I started drawing, especially my classmates, people would crowd around me and was like, oh, what are you drawing? That kind of stuff. But this time, I think it was more significant because I was around what at the time what I perceived as other artists, peers, equals.
Yeah.
Oh. What is
So in a way, that sort of put you from just a passive position to a more active role.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But then afterwards, you fizzled out.
Yeah. That's the thing with external motivation. It's like, you can burn bright pretty quickly and pretty strongly, but after a while, you might like I don't know. It's just whether it can be external motivation can be taken away pretty quickly. Just whether it be because you run out of energy, or because of just I don't know. At the time, I was talking like I talked about this previous class. I saw their graduating film, and they were bad. They were really bad. Oh yeah, I forgot. Like we would be watching like previous films made by like 2 or 5 years ago, and I'd just be there saying, "This is garbage. What is this shit?" And then all my classmates would get really pissed off at me, saying, "Why are you making fun of these pieces of art? What are you doing?" And I was pretty vocal about my opinion as well. I got Psycho into deep shit because he was associating with me. We basically became the class pariahs.
Yeah.
Yeah. I dragged him into yeah.
Oh, Bob.
Yeah.
The joys of being...
And I didn't even say anything bad about the work. It's just because I was your friend.
You know what? You were his friend, but he didn't think you were going to be friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, so how I met Bob is... we had this orientation in the beginning of the school year where all the kids got together, and then we were told, I don't remember what she was, the program coordinator or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, she gave a speech, and it was this dark room, and I remember looking at everyone, and then I saw Bob, this tall Chinese guy, and he looked super stone-faced, and I knew inside that this is going to be my friend.
Yeah.
And then it was very yes, Bob is going to be my... Well, Anyway, he's gonna be my friend, and I want to be friends with this guy. Hadn't seen your work, hadn't talked to you at all. And then the first time, I think it was the first day of actual classes.
Yeah.
And then we went out for lunch, and I went out with you and this other girl, and then Bob started.
I started trying to crack jokes.
And they were bad.
They were really, really, really bad.
Yeah, really bad.
Yeah,
you were eating a burger and talking about doing things to the things inside.
Lettuce or something.
Yeah.
And the thing was, throughout all this time, like my father's basically always telling me, "Oh, you're supposed," because he acts like this big extrovert and this really charismatic guy, and he's always telling me, "Oh, you have to do this because you got nothing to lose. You got nothing to lose." No, I had plenty to lose.
Yeah, then I just got this impression of you like it didn't feel right. Didn't feel like that's what you were, but it was very like I don't want to be friends with you that
anymore.
much.
Yeah.
It's like this doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
But then it was still like a thing. You're still the guy
still
who
tall.
wanted.
You're still tall. You're still Chinese.
Well, that wasn't it. It wasn't it. It was the aura. There was like an aura of I gravitate towards people with mental problems. Right, Flavia?
Yeah. Sure do.
So
Sure do.
I usually am just I can sense. I don't know. I guess it's just
You
picking
can
up.
smell their fear.
I guess it resonates with me. Like, oh, you're someone who has suffered. And I've suffered, so...
We can suffer together.
Yeah, there's a connection. Whereas, especially when I was young, when I saw people who were, like, happy or smiling, I felt pissed off at them. Like, what's there to be happy with? Have you not lived life? Like, why are you smiling?
Yeah.
You're stupid.
Yeah.
This is stupid. So, yeah. And then after I started... I would get along with Bob, and he would say these things of like, "Oh, this is shit," and then it's like I kind of understood his point of view.
Yeah.
But at the same time, in the beginning, I was friends with everyone. I had to hold back from laughing. But it's kind of like, oh, I kind of see your point here. I kind of find this funny. And then everyone else is getting pissed off, and I kind of find this funny too.
You goaded me! You goaded me! You goaded me! You were like, yes! Tell them how it is!
Well, to a point.
To a point. Yeah.
I still understood both sides.
Yeah.
Then
It's
the
like,
rest
I
is...
can see how this is someone working really hard, and this is admirable, and they're doing this well.
Yeah.
But then it's like you're just sitting there judging, and this is really funny.
Yeah. And I think people can tell sometimes when I'm building up to it, right? I'm sitting there, I just have this face. I'm pissed off.
I saw like there were a few classmates who got really sensitive to you.
Yeah.
Like, shut up, stop talking.
Yeah. They just tell me to shut up. It's just like, stop making fun of these people, you know?
Stop it.
Yeah, stop it.
Stop.
It's just like, I don't like. It's like they don't like me being negative or something. But I just didn't give a shit. It's like, how can you not see this as garbage?
Yeah. Then anyway. Sorry, I just remembered some things you told me as well.
Like what?
Like when you're like, oh yeah, before this I went to Emily Carr and I saw their life drawings. They would destroy you.
Yeah.
They would destroy you.
Yeah, I was pretty black and white in my opinions. And it's just like, I just thought I knew everything. Because like I guess I picked up a little bit of that from my father. Just like, he just like rant and say like,
If
oh,
you
this...
picked up a little bit, I imagine how much he must have.
Yeah. Well, he's got a lot of bitterness. Let's just say it that way.
Oh, Bob.
But anyway, it turned out okay.
Turned out okay.
I guess.
Turned out 2 arms, 2 legs.
Oh
Sometimes
yeah, we're
4.
talking about being friends.
Yeah.
And then it was an acting class where we're working together.
Yeah.
And I thought we were already friends.
Yeah.
And then I was talking about how we keep in touch after school or something. And
I was having none of that.
Shut down.
yeah, no, probably after we'll never talk again.
Yeah.
Why?
Oh, that hurt.
I had to drag Bob into being my friend.
That's
You're
Kicking-
my friend! You're my friend!
I was kicking and screaming, no, I'm not your friend! I'm not your friend!
And then like you.
you.
And then you met me.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah,
That was easier.
Yeah.
That was easier. It took me less to call you my friend.
Yeah. My friend.
Friends for life, yo.
But now here we are.
Yeah.
And there you stand.
Yeah.
So Bob, apparently you have trouble making friends.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you have trouble with in your day-to-day life?
Well, I have trouble understanding social cues and other subtleties. What somebody might say to me, I might end up interpreting as something else, or they tell me something and I think I understand it, but later on I find out that I didn't understand it. So that creates a lot of misunderstandings. That happens a lot during work, so I might end up getting instructions, but I might get it wrong, and the people that are supposed to be working or supervising me get annoyed. In one case, I had a pretty bad misunderstanding with a friend. He was making a joke at my expense, but I didn't take it as a joke. I took it seriously because I thought that they were serious. And I couldn't detect the tones or the cues or the subtleties. That ended up with me basically spiraling into very negative thoughts, which ended up with me in the hospital, basically. It got bad enough where I became suicidal. So yeah, I suppose that's one of the biggest problems I have, is just understanding what things really are in terms of reality. And it happens quite frequently. Like sometimes it accumulates. Other times something happens and it's enough to off balance me completely. Then I lose complete touch with reality, and then I just start panicking, which actually makes whatever situation I'm in worse, etc., etc.
What was it like at the hospital?
It was well, I suppose I was surprised at how well I fit in there. It's just like, oh, I'm just here and things are happening for me, and it's just like I'm already pretty passive. So in an environment where I'm supposed to be completely passive, it's like, oh, okay, well, things just happen. Meals arrive at a certain time. You're supposed to go to sleep at a certain time, and then it's just like, oh, okay, it's fine. It's kind of boring. The feeling is that the people there don't really know what they're doing a lot of the times, especially when they're talking to patients. They would ask repetitive questions every day. It's like, do you feel safe today? And it's like, yeah, okay. That kind of stuff, yeah.
So in the hospital, while you were there, you were diagnosed with Asperger's, right?
Yeah.
Do you...
The thing with the diagnosis was that I was very surprised at how quickly they sort of diagnosed me with that, because I wasn't under the impression that you're supposed to go through a significant amount of testing. They also slap on the ADHD thing a lot. I think that's pretty rampant with, I don't know, I guess Western society. I'm not sure what it's like in Europe. I'm not sure if they do that, but in America and Canada, at least, it seems to be pretty frequent that they'll try to put you into ADHD. But yeah, they diagnosed me with Asperger's, which is something that I don't think I really agree with. I can certainly see why they would, but when I think about it, it's just like they didn't really talk to me as if like they're trying to find out what the diagnosis is. They just came up with like, well, it's most likely he's this, therefore everything, all the problems that he has, everything he describes, we're going to view it as an Asperger thing.
Do you know why? Do you know what the cues were that led them to this diagnosis?
I don't know. Maybe I was just describing my experiences with difficulties understanding social stuff, and they just came up with the idea of just being Asperger's. They said, "Oh, most likely you're kind of autistic or something like that."
Yeah, you're on the spectrum, but you're high functioning.
Yeah. They said that exactly, actually. Afterwards, when I was what's the word? Released from the hospital? Discharged, there we go. When I was discharged, they sent me to a BC Children's Hospital, and they diagnosed me there. but it was the same feeling. They were already looking for the Asperger's thing, and they just said, "Oh, most likely you have Asperger's," and that's what it felt like. They were already they were ready to put me into this box, and
yeah, because the cues, the check marks they were following were, you, as you said, you had trouble regulating your volume of voice. You have difficulty reading expressions or manifesting expressions. You have a more or less monotonous flow of voice, especially when talking about your own story, about emotional things. You don't fluctuate as, I suppose, the normal person would. And you have difficulty following instructions. Unless they're very in a specific type of thing. And I suppose if they knew about your drawings, they might have, like, oh, you do repetitive things, you draw things obsessively and stuff.
I told them, it's like, oh, what do you do with art? And it's like, well, I'm studying anatomy right now. And they took that as me obsessively drawing anatomy.
Oh, that's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Which you did.
I did.
How many thousands of arms did you draw?
Yeah, but it's like... I was doing it because I became obsessed with trying to get into anatomy. It's like, oh, I need to do something to improve. But then they took that mentality as pure obsession.
Yeah, I've seen this a few times, even in my own experience with Romanian psychologists, when they will look at an artist, and an artist is studying anatomy, like drawing skeletons, drawing muscles, and they will categorize that as a morbid obsession. Like, oh, if you do a bunch of studies, like if you do 20 studies, if you do an iterative approach to the skeleton, you show this to a psychologist, or if they just browse through your things, they would, like some of them, especially the older ones, are in a mindset to think, no, you have morbid thoughts, you have obsessive thoughts, you have violent tendency, and...
So Bob would have a fetish for flayed arms?
Yeah.
I guess that's what they thought, or something like that.
Yeah. He really likes arms, but without the skin.
Yeah.
No skin at all.
Yeah, he's obsessed with torture or something.
Yeah. Granted, if they looked at the rest of your art,
well, if they looked,
that's the least of the problem.
If they looked at the rest of my art, then they came up with like, oh, you're obsessed with disturbing things, and it's just like, okay, fine, but they didn't. They didn't look at my drawings. They didn't say, oh, do you have any drawings to show? They just said, oh, what do you draw? It's like, well, I'm drawing anatomy right now. And they diagnosed me with that.
So you were saying you didn't quite feel listened to or acknowledged in the hospital during the diagnosis process?
It's like, I think maybe it's just because they're overworked with the healthcare that they have, because they have a continuous flow of patients coming in. So, I'd be going, when I was in the hospital, they'd just be like, okay, we're going to find the quickest way to get you ready and out. So we can have another patient come in because we think you're fine. And then they discharged me. I was recommended to the people that assess the Asperger's thing. And then, it kind of felt the same way. Like they were on they were dealing with a lot of people because there was a 2-week span between each visit. And whenever I come back and talk to them, they pretty much forgot a lot about me. And it's just like, okay, fine, you're overworked. You probably have a lot of things you want to check off and be done with, that kind of stuff. So they'll listen to a point. They'll listen to the point where it's like, okay, we can put you in this category, and then when we do, we're going to give you some meds or some other stuff, and we're done with you. So yeah.
And you were on meds for a while afterwards, right?
A little bit, yeah. Antidepressants, some other stuff. Those didn't work. I don't know if it's because I was actually really depressed or not, but that's just the way it was.
How was it recovering from the initial thought that made you spiral out of control and make you so depressed? Like, how was it getting over it?
Getting over it.
Like, did you regain your touch with reality?
In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. Because then it's like the overwhelming feeling was that I like it was my fault. Like I'd screwed up. I'd got lost in my own head. Therefore, it's all my responsibility, which I think in a way it was. So yeah, I think I'm better now, but yeah.
You're better now, and your arms are falling off.
Darkest Dungeon's contribution to your health. Do you want to talk a bit about that? Like, because I know for most people they might consider, oh, you just really like this video game. But from hearing you talk about it, it sounds a bit different. So what do you like about Darkest Dungeon?
Probably just a power trip. Like, the format of Darkest Dungeon is pretty easy to understand. Like, for me, it wasn't that much of a hurdle. I guess because before buying it, I saw walkthroughs, and then people were already playing it, and then I saw how they were doing it, and it's like, oh, I think I can do better than these people. So, I decided to get the game, and then got really into it. And the thing that I really like about Darkest Dungeon is just, I think I said it before, power trip. And basically, I feel like I'm in control in video games, and the other one is escapism, which I've always had in video games, just because I have trouble handling reality. Reality is depressing for me. But in video games, things are kind of marked out to be pretty easy. It's like you have a goal, you have something you want to achieve, you have fun while doing it, which life doesn't really give you a lot of the times. So with Darkest Dungeon, it was just basically that. I'm in control, and even when I'm out of control, I can eventually gain control really easily. Yeah, I guess that's it. I just became obsessed with it. It became a place of comfort for me to go into, because I hadn't played video games for very much when I've gotten serious about art. So then when I got into it, it's like, oh, I like it here. I forgot about this.
Mm-hmm.
So even when the pain started showing up in my arms, it's just like, oh no, this is the joy that I get from being in this place is more powerful than the pain. To the point where eventually the pain impedes me playing the game and my work. And it's like, oh, okay, I gotta stop. This cannot go on.
Yeah, now you're pretty much only drawing traditionally.
Yep.
Well, at least there's that. It's nice to see you drawing again. And I mean, you've been drawing for a while, but it's nice to see you on video drawing again.
Yeah. Well, I suppose the good thing about just being screwed over in terms of digitally is that drawing traditionally seems to really suit me. There's more, I've always experienced this with digital, is that there's a level of disconnectedness, I guess. I'm not even sure if that's a word, but that's what it feels like. Whereas on traditional, you get everything. You get the sensation of pressure of pen against the paper. You get to feel everything happening in real time. There's no barrier with a computer, and you might not be able to do as many fast things on the computer, but on traditional, there's more sensory information. So that's what I like about it. But even going back to the whole power trip thing with Darkest Dungeon, even when I was young, like in China and stuff like that, I've had a bit of problems with it, like the fact that I would abuse my childhood friends physically and emotionally. Looking back on it, I can kind of understand why. Like, coming from a point as a baby, I was put through immense pain, and I'm not even conscious at that point, so I don't get a choice to say. I couldn't even say I don't want this pain. I could only scream. So I suppose that sort of manifested itself into sort of a sadistic side of me. Like, there is a part of me that enjoys hurting people, and it's something that I think I've gotten used to, but or gotten over. But it's like I can still remember it being there, which is something I'm not proud of. But I suppose that's what happens. You experience trauma, and then you can't.
At least you're processing it a lot more now, because from my perspective, in the last 5-6 years, you've made tons of progress, especially in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
In terms of understanding yourself and
I think processing my own problems, as well as learning to empathize more, because that's a problem that I had. I was very selfish when I was younger. I didn't really think about other people's feeling as much, hence the don't you understand that this is shit, and your opinions suck. And I didn't view people as people. I viewed them as whether or not they had respectable traits, if they had respectable goals. Which is probably why I made a lot of enemies in VFS, or just people who didn't want to listen to me anymore. But Yeah. Now that I've understood, it's just like I don't want to really hurt people anymore. Like I still want to pursue a goal of creating quality, and inevitably that will cause a difference in opinion. But I don't want to do it out of maliciousness anymore, which is sort of a power trip thing. Oh, I have a better opinion than this person, therefore I'm superior to you. I can hurt you in any way because you don't understand how important it is to do something. It's no longer really like that. Well, at least I hope it is.
Well, yeah, that's good. Well, this is a pretty heavy. It started out quite light and ended quite heavy.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for sharing, Bob.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks for helping get to the bottom of it, Flavia. It's one of the things that I really believe in, is that art and psychology are very, very connected. And often it's something I encounter a lot of resistance against, mostly from artists, when you bring up stuff like that. Like, oh, why do you draw this? I've gotten a lot of almost hostile, like, what do you mean I just like it? I just like it. That's it. Or, no, there's no special reason for it. I'm hoping,
a lot of denial.
Yeah, I'm hoping that at least in a few cases, it, like with your story, Bob, with mine, maybe with yours, Flavia, one day, it exposes that all the things we do, the things we draw, the things we prefer, they come from some place. And when you understand that, it gives you at least a degree of choice in the matter, where you know, okay, so this is who I am, and this is why I do the things I do.
I think that's one of the best ways of just creating more honest work.
Yeah.
Yeah, is because a lot of the times when I see or listen to other artists talk about why they like doing the things that they do, it's on a very surface level.
Yeah.
I like it because of this TV show, and if they examine it, it's just like, oh, it's because I saw it as a kid and I really enjoyed it as a kid. So then what's the emotion you're expressing? Well, you're expressing nostalgia. You might be expressing your tastes, but it doesn't really go beyond that. But once,
even so, there is like, why this show and not another show?
Yeah,
and there's also the layer of you're expressing nostalgia, but if you're an adult and you're expressing overly expressing nostalgia, it means that within your adult life there isn't much to ground you in it, and therefore you're going back to your childhood and like keep going back to a time where things were better. Therefore, by contrast, something is wrong in the present. It's like, why that time? What did you have at that time that you're nostalgic about? Did you have more safety? Did you have more care around you? Were you taken care of? Did you have less responsibility? Like, what could be the reasons that you're going back to that moment in time that is frozen in an ideal state?
Yeah. I think it's because they don't, I don't know, maybe it's because they don't have access to a psychologist, but or at least a good one, because there are psychologists, but they might not actually know what they're talking about. But they don't. The question isn't really asked, like you pointed out, why they return to whatever show or something in that moment and period of time of their childhood. They don't really ask that. They just express their taste. I like this show, therefore fan art. I like this thing, therefore monsters and orcs or that kind of stuff.
It usually doesn't take long to scratch beneath the surface and discover there's more there than what they're saying. Mm-hmm. Even a comment such as, I don't like this show, and then someone replying with, oh, you're ruining my childhood. It's like, why would that ruin your childhood, but what was it that made this so special to you at that period? And oftentimes I've asked people similar questions, and the answers can be pretty telling. Like, oh, well, at that time, maybe my school life or my home life was pretty bad. Maybe my parents were getting divorced or something, and I remember watching that show, and I really liked it. And it's like, oh, that might have been your escape. That was something you poured all your heart into. And then when someone casually demeans it, it's a feeling of, oh, you're taking away something from me. And I think it's good to be understanding of stuff like that, but it's much better to be the person who, when you understand your own childhood, why you prefer things, what it means for you. And when you do that, you can kind of capitalize on it. So for you, Bob, it's you like drawing, or I don't know, do you like drawing screaming faces, or do you just draw screaming faces?
In the past, I just drew screaming faces, but recently, I think you saw one of my sketchbooks, and then I just went through a period of these figures without noses. They just have pits for eyes, and they're just this wide gaping mouth that's screaming.
Yeah.
When I draw that, it's like it feels familiar, like I can feel the scream, if that makes any sense. And I ended up going through this thing where it's just like the mouth becomes wider and wider, and it's just screaming louder and louder, and it's just like, no, the scream needs to be larger. It needs to be even larger. Like as I'm saying it, I'm feeling it. It's like I can feel the scream. It's a physical reaction. And
they seem, at least from what I've seen, to be very disconnected from bone. Like the jaw is not so connected. I don't feel the jaw underneath.
Yeah, it's weird. It's almost like to the point where it's just like there's no jaw there at all. It's just this blob of flesh, and it can just open up and.
Which is pretty similar to what you went through with your burn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose scar tissue.
Yeah. Or at least, I don't know, because like there was a point where it's like even when I was drawing the screams, I can also feel the strain on the bones. But it just feels as though if I put a bone there, it's like the scream isn't enough. It's not intense enough with the bone there. Mm-hmm. It needs to be more. It needs to be more intense. And et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So, yeah, pretty much, guess that wraps it up. Thanks again for Bob and Flavia.
Yeah.
Joining me on this psychological adventure. And to everyone else, I hope this helped, and thanks for watching.
It's done.